Now, most of you will know of Alan Kohler. He's a journalism veteran, even a legend, a former Fairfax editor, long-time business analyst, an entrepreneur who's founded and sold on his own publications, a business commentator at The Australian for many, many years, the News Corp national flagship, and for many years widely known in this role too.
And second, cheese futures are going off because of surging sales of pizzas and cheeseburgers. And that's finance.
Yep, nightly finance reports on the ABC. Kohler is one of those rarest of beasts, an ABC News Corp crossover. Not anymore. He's left The Australian and is now writing for the New Daily. The paper, as we've showed you before, is controlled by industry super funds and therefore largely by the big unions. And this week, Kohler wrote an incredible piece, literally incredible, titled Scott Morrison, the Murdochs and the Crime of the Century. In this climate policy rant, Kohler wrote that those people who actually know what's going on have allowed themselves to be intimidated by Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch and their bullies, who in turn have been collaborators in the crime of the century. Wow, this is not Bob Brown or Kevin Rudd writing. This is not Greta Thunberg or Guy Bastida. This is Alan Kohler. He went on that the fossil fuel industry managed to turn global warming into a political issue, left saying it's happening, right saying it's not, might have been tactically brilliant, but it was also a vast global crime. As you see, Kohler, like many, is a climate alarmist. He went on and said a looming catastrophe verified by scientists was turned into just another political debate to protect the profits of oil, gas and coal companies. The Murdochs were enthusiastic accessories to the crime, wrote Kohler, and they feverishly supported the politicisation of climate change and enabled the cynical right-wing politicians who chose to exploit it, like Tony Abbott, Scott Morrison and others. Now, Kohler's entitled to his views on climate, of course, however alarmist and impractical they might be. There's no problem there. But wild accusations against individuals or organisations about crimes of the century, they take it all a bit too far, I reckon. You'd want to have some specific claims and evidence, wouldn't you? This is typical, though, of the sanctimony you often get on this issue, the moral superiority of those who believe this is a black and white issue, a moral cause, rather than a policy area demanding practical and rational responses. Anyway, the key media point here is that these climate views from Kohler are not surprising. His views have always aligned with his other employer, the ABC, on these issues. I've had these discussions with him occasionally when we catch up at the federal budget and the like. And he's trumpeted them too at public forums like this one just over 2 years ago.
I think the Australian right-wing's decade-long project to thwart effective climate change action is one of the most destructive and self-destructive episodes in our political history.
Remember, Alan Kohler was a well-paid senior commentator at News Corp at The Australian at this time. And he was happy to take the paycheck and identify that employer as part of what he saw as the problem.
I actually think the main thing was the election of Malcolm Turnbull as Liberal leader and leader of the opposition in 2008, which drove Australia's right wing mad, both in the party and more broadly in the media. Well, TGB and my employer, News Corp, one of my employers, News Corp, drove them mad.
Pretty strong views. How would you go having a dip at your employer publicly like that? But it was no problem for Kohler. He remained unbridled as a News Corp commentator. And here's a sample of what he was publishing in The Australian over the years. Here's June 2017, where he wrote, "There is simply no political future for climate change denial anymore, either in domestic electorates, businesses or the rest of the world." Then April 2019, in Australia, all efforts to focus the government on assessing the impact of climate change and preparing for it have been buried under the mountains of garbage talked about the subject or simply dismissed as crap. September that year, it's far more important that there's a national consensus that global warming is real and on what Australia should do about it. his views have been consistent. January last year, the coalition simply doesn't take climate change seriously. Never has, despite the recent attempts to scramble back to a vaguely credible position after the bushfires. In Australia, politics has prevailed over scientific reality. It is time to get politics out of science. I could go on, but you get the picture. Now, I've checked with Alan today. He left News Corp and The Australian of his own volition. He thinks views opposed to his got a better run, but confirms there was never any attempt to constrain, restrict or modify anything he wrote on climate policy. Doesn't that destroy his crime of the century thesis? There he was for years, in the heart of the beast, writing whatever he liked on the issue. It was displayed prominently, and he was paid handsomely. That's diversity. That's media freedom. Where's the unfettered diversity of views on this issue at other media organisations? Isn't it the ABC and 9 newspapers who seem to have a monolithic or groupthink approach on climate policy? Let's bring in the panel now. We're joined by Sophie Ellsworth, media writer for The Australian, joining us from Melbourne. And in Sydney, Louise Roberts, the editor of Smart Daily and obviously an opinion columnist there at the Daily Telegraph as well, Louise. Hasn't Alan Kohler proved exactly the opposite to the point he was trying to make?
Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Hi, Sophie. Look, exactly. Look, people like to think if you're a columnist or a commentator for a News Corp title that you get told what to write and how to write it. And he was given free rein to sort of espouse his views on climate change for many years. And it somewhat weakens his enthusiasm or maybe his validity as a commentator to now attack his former employer. I mean, the general public can see through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think good on him, Sophie, for having these views. I've often disagreed of his assessments about the economics and the politics of this. But this is why I was surprised to see his piece in the New Daily this week, because it's been so obvious. He's been so prominent in News Corp publications arguing this climate alarmist line.
Chris, I'm not sure what happens to employees when they leave certain employers, but it's happened a few times, and Alan's a case here where he's moved on from News Corp, but has obviously got a few axes to grind, it appears. And I think also importantly, Chris, he needs to update his Twitter profile, because when I last looked, he said he's still employed at The Australian. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but it seems like once they leave, they're happy to stick the boot in, but there seems to be no problem at all when they're actually receiving their handsome paychecks, as you put it.
I've got to say, I spoke to Alan today. I do love his spots doing finance on the ABC News. It's one of the best aspects of their news. He always puts a bit of interesting info and humour into it. But the other point here, Louise, is he did say to me on the phone, he said, perhaps I should have mentioned that I have actually never been restrained by News Corp as to what I write about climate. Now, it's a kind of central point when you're saying that they're involved in shaping the debate and distorting the debate. Your own experience doesn't bear that out.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, people, as I said, people think that we're sort of somehow brainwashed into towing a certain line or a certain debate, and that's not the case at all. And Alan enjoyed that sort of freedom to express his views, as do many columnists at News Corp, including myself.